Welcome to Homebrew Master. I'm Sarah, and I'm your host and Brewmaster. On this show, we find homebrewers and give them the opportunity to work with a professional. They get to learn some of the science behind brewing while I try to up their homebrew game. Today, we're brewing with Kevin, and we're making a red ale, and then later on we'll be catching up with Jeff from Concession Road Brewing for the tasting. This is Homebrew Master. Welcome to Homebrew Master. I'm your host, Sarah. Today we're joined by Kevin. Kevin, you want to tell me a little bit about your history with brewing?
Well, I started back in 2014 with a Mr. Beer kit as a Christmas present.
Yeah.
And it turned out better than expected. So I kept going with that, which was quite nice. Then the following year moved up to bigger 5-gallon kits, just extracts. And those were all good too. So I just kind of followed path, and next step was all grain.
Yep.
So I got into that, which has been what I've been doing for quite a few years now.
Nice.
It's about 7 years total.
Yeah. You enjoy the all grain brewing?
I do, yeah. There's a lot more to it, a lot more cleaning, prep, and all that. But in the end, it's nicer, I think.
Yeah, you have a little more control, I feel, over your final product.
Yeah, and that's what I was finding with extract, trying to make up recipes or trying to follow certain guidelines, style guidelines. It seemed very limited.
Yes.
Because you're starting with only a couple extract bases.
Yeah, pre-made, basically mashes.
Yeah. So you can't really venture out too far. With the all grain, you can, do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do whatever you want, for sure. So what kind of beers do you like to brew, and what kind of beers do you like to drink?
I like to brew a variety of beers, like Hefeweizens, cream ales, the odd red ale, a Guinness clone, so a stout.
Yeah.
A
pretty much
good
anything.
Range. Yeah, a good range just to keep a variety.
Fair enough.
Variety going.
Well, today we're going to brew a red beer for you.
That sounds great.
Because you said you haven't had a lot of chance to work on that. But I know you brought a sample for us. Now, this isn't a red ale, is it?
No, it's not. It's a Hefeweizen.
I'll let you pour that since it's yours.
Okay.
So we're going German-style wheat beer?
Yeah.
Okay, very nice.
This is with the WLP 300 yeast as well.
Okay. Well, let's give this a taste. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, the aroma's great. Oh, that's a Hefeweizen for sure. Got that nice banana, a little bit of clove in the background. I can see what you mean, though. It is a little
thick.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
In the mouthfeel for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we can work on that a little bit. Otherwise, very tasty beer.
Thank you.
So we're gonna do a red beer today. So we should sample one of those as well. Talk about what we might want to change, what we like about this one.
A couple that I've made seem to be on the very dark end of red.
Right. So do you use any red malt when you're making a red, or do you try to blend your other grains?
Yeah. Like some of the recipes that I've been looking at and trying to follow have like chocolate malts and some barley in there too. Or roasted barley, sorry.
Yeah.
Which seems to really pull the color down into the darker.
Into the darker, more brown almost.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy's a little more hoppy on the aroma.
Yeah.
Oh, and on the finish. That's funny. You don't normally find a red that's a little more hop forward. They're usually a little maltier than that.
Yeah, it's more of an American red.
Yes.
Hoppy.
So I'm guessing the red you're going for is a little bit more on the malty side than what we're tasting right now.
Yes, ideally.
Ideally, but do you like the dryness of this one?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a nice finish to it. It still has that malty there.
Yeah.
The hops are...
They're definitely there, but you can, the malt is the backbone for sure of this beer. Now, what are we thinking about the color? Do we like the color? Are you looking for something a little darker?
I think a little darker.
Yeah.
It seems to be on the yellower red color on this one, it seems.
So you're hoping to get sort of that nice deep red. Yes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the recipe that we're gonna brew today. We're gonna talk about grain a little bit first. Okay. So we are just using pale ale malt for your base because I find it gives a nice malty, little bit more sort of sweeter of the base malts.
Okay.
So I like it when I'm going for a more malty style beer. We are gonna add some red malt. it just kind of makes life easier when you're going for a red. Now, I do recommend people give these a little taste. It just helps you to see what you're going to be experiencing in your final product.
Okay, get an idea.
And one of the things that I find interesting about red malts is they're never sweet. It's never like drinking or tasting a base malt or a melanoidin malt. They're very crackery is the only word I can think of to use. So you know, if you're using a red malt and you want that malty sweetness, you need to add some other stuff to sort of help bump that up a little bit. So one of the things we're using for that is going to be the Munich malt. So you get a little bit more sweetness. You still get a bit of that sort of rosy color adding in with the Munich. And then this will help sort of bump up the color and bring up the complex malt profile that we're looking for.
Okay.
Now, one of the things I do like to do when I'm using a red malt, because technically you can use them for your whole grain bill, but I don't think you would really enjoy the beer that you would get at the end.
Right. Just
because it would be a one-note malt flavor, right? Where you're looking for sort of a more complex flavor profile.
Just the one.
So one of the things I like to do is use the roasted barley, not actually in the mash, but at the end of the mash to cap it. So you just put it on top as you're sparging, and you just get that nice dark color coming through, which helps to maintain and bump up the red that you're getting at the beginning of your sparge, that, as you know, by the end of your sparge is completely gone. So the little bit of roasted barley on top, the black just helps to bring that red out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's one of the tricks that I like to do. Mm-hmm. And then you don't end up with that roast flavor in your final product.
Yeah, because it doesn't take a lot of roasted barley to taste it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, we're just gonna add a little bit at the end just to help bring out that color, and it's just gonna have the sparge water going through it, so it's not gonna sit in water for very long. So we should avoid the roast flavor. And then hops, of course, not as important when we're talking about a malt forward beer, but still need them for balance.
Right.
So we're just using Zeus for your bittering hop. It's just a high alpha acid to get a little bit of bitterness in there, help sort of balance everything out. But for your aroma hop, we're actually going for Fuggles. So a near noble hop, as in one of the oldest hops. These I don't recommend tasting. But what I do recommend with hops, because when you first smell them, they all basically smell the same. They're basically just green. But if you give them a rub in between your hands, you're gonna help bring out all of the essential oils that are in there, and it'll give you a better idea of what sort of aromas and flavors you're gonna end up with in your final product.
Okay.
And then after you rub them a bit, you just smell your hands. Because it's a near noble hop, you get that sort of earthy, herbal, a little bit spicy sort of notes that just complement the sort of complex malt profile that we're going for. All right, let's get to brewing then. Perfect, let's go mash in. So I'm just gonna give these guys a big stir here. Welcome back to Homebrew Master. We're about to brew a red ale with intermediate brewer Kevin. Let's get started. So you wanted to go for a slightly drier version of a red beer. So I think we're gonna mash in at 65.
Okay.
And I know you're used to working with the 2-vessel system, so we thought we might as well show you the single vessel system and see how you like it.
My name's Kevin McNeely, and I'm from Port Dover. I started brewing in 2014. My wife gave me a Mr. Beer kit for Christmas. Everything went really well with it, tasted really good. And then the following Christmas, I got bigger beer kits to do 5-gallon batches. So I went to 5-gallon batches extract brewing for about a year. Then after that, I jumped into all grain brewing.
So I've got our strike water at 67 degrees. I'm just gonna drop it down right there.
Okay.
And now we're good to go mash in. We were going for a 5% beer, and the amount of grain that you have dictates how much alcohol you end up with in the end, because your grain becomes sugar in solution, which then gets fermented to alcohol. So for his beer, we had 3 kilograms of pale, which is a sweeter base malt. It's going to give you most of your extract and sugars. We had 1 kilogram of Munich, which is technically a base malt, but it also gives you a little bit of that orangey color. Then we used a kilogram of red ale malt to really bump that color up. We mashed at 65 degrees Celsius. Now you generally mash between 64 and 67 degrees. 64 is going to give you a drier, lighter beer, and 67 is going to give you a sweeter, maltier, more robust beer. Now we went with 65, even though a red ale tends to be a sweeter style. Kevin was saying that he wanted it to be a little bit less on the sweet side, so we wanted to dry it out a bit, but keep some of that body in there. So we will just set this guy on, turn him down real low, just so we're recirculating, like that. And we will set our timer for an hour, and then we'll be back for the next step of the brew.
Okay, sounds good.
So working with Kevin was great. He had a fair bit of experience with all grain brew, but he was really working on how to sort of perfect his red ale recipe. All right, so our mash has been sitting for an hour now. We're ready to start the sparge, which is where we basically add hot water to rinse all the colors and flavors and proteins out of the malt and keep them in our beer, get that nice work going. And we actually capped the mash with roasted barley, which is a very dark malt. And when I say cap the mash, what I mean is when we go to sparge, we put a tiny layer of roasted barley on top, because to really keep that red color in solution, you actually need to add a little bit of black to it.
It was very interesting to be able to pull out colors like the roasted malt using that just a little bit, but not in the full mash.
The nice thing about the all-in-one system is what was your mash tun becomes your kettle. So you can just use the handle there.
And yeah.
And you're just gonna put it in the two holes and then lift up. Exactly, and then twist. There you go. So now you got a kettle going on. So another nice thing is you don't have to wait to finish your sparge to start heating up. So you can actually go around front and you're gonna hit the pause button.
Okay.
And then your temperature, you're gonna hit the increase button until it goes all the way up until HH, which is basically your boil setting.
Okay, it says HH.
Perfect, then just hit play, and both the burners should come on for us. And now you're just gonna sparge like you would with any other brew. So we've got the measuring cup there for you, and I've got the hot liquor tank here, so you can just start filling that up and washing those grains.
All right.
Now when I do the sparge, I do like to have the temperature pretty high because we don't get to do a mash out in this, so you don't get to sort of loosen up the mash and stop the enzyme activity. I use really hot water to sort of simulate the same step, basically.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll find, like when you start doing this, that it's not rinsing through really easily because your grains aren't really hot, especially since we were mashing at 65. But the longer you do the sparge, the more you'll start to find everything loosening up and all of those liquids coming through. And we're basically aiming for about 25 liters because you're gonna lose some of your volume in the actual brew, and then you're gonna lose a little bit more in the fermenter at the end. It should give us about 20 liters when all is said and done. So that'll probably be our last water addition. One of the things I like about the Rover Brew, you can see the demarcations on the back there. Yeah. And then if you look down the side, it gives you a better idea of where you sort of are. And if you use your flashlight there, you'll probably be able to see that we're getting real close to 25 liters.
Yeah, we're at 25 liters now.
Perfect. So now we can just take the grain right off, and you can pop that whole section into the bucket there.
Bucket.
Perfect, and we'll just let that drain and deal with it in a little bit. So now all we have to do is get our lid back on and wait for it to come up to a boil. Then we can start adding our hops. A lot of the people that participated in the show had minimal brewing experience, or they hadn't had any all grain experience at the very least. It was really fun to work with someone who had a lot of all grain experience and had a few more technical questions for me. All right, so it looks like we're just about up to a boil. As I'm sure you've noticed with your system too, sometimes all of those malt proteins start coming out right before you come up to a boil, and if you don't stir them back in, then you end up with a boil over, which is just a big mess to clean up. So I'm just gonna give these guys a big stir here, get them back incorporated in, and then once that's done, we can add our hops and start the boil. We're just going for Zeus for your bittering hop, just looking for those big alpha acids, try to balance out your malty beer a little bit. So I like to use these hop balls, just helps keep the hops out of the pump, give you longer run time for your machine. And then you can actually just connect it right onto the arm here and get those in. So now we've got our bittering hops in, we'll set our timer for an hour. As far as the aroma hop is concerned, for Kevin, we went with 30 grams of Fuggles. So Fuggles is a near noble hop. That means that it's one of the oldest styles that was ever bred, and it gives you sort of earthy, a little bit of spice, a little bit of floral notes. All right, so now that we've got our finishing hops in, I know that they're in the balls, but I still like to do a 15-minute whirlpool. Just make sure that you got your wort moving through those hops and you're getting all your flavors out. So another nice part about these all-in-one systems is you can actually buy a whirlpool arm. So that guy just sits right in there along the edge. And I always like to start it in the closed position. Because the arm is full of air, if you just start it with your pump open and the valve all the way open, you're gonna make a whole bunch of air bubbles and splash that hot wort up on you. So if you wanna turn on the pump over here, it's just that other button, perfect. And then you can slowly open that valve. There's the bubbles. And now we'll just let that go for 15 minutes and we can start to set up our chiller to finish off this beer.
I am excited to try it. It's gonna be a red ale that I've been wanting to make.
So our whirlpool's been going for about 15 minutes now. So we can turn the pump off if you just wanna hit that again. And now we can basically, you want to give it about 10 minutes to sit. Just make sure you get all of those flavors and all of everything you want from the hops out. But while we're waiting, we can set up for the cast out. So as you can see, I have a wort chiller. Yeah. So it's got the 4 sections. You got your cold water coming in, hot water coming out, wort going in hot and coming out cool. So it's basically plates sitting on top of each other. The water goes one way, the wort goes the other, and it cools it down.
Okay.
So we can start by getting rid of our whirlpool arm. And then I basically just have a double-sided cam lock adapter. So we can put that guy in. And as you know, sanitation is really important on the cold side of your brewing. So I've already got the beer coming outside full of sanitizer. Our fermenter is sanitized. And the nice thing about the boiling hot wort is it will actually sanitize on its way out. So we don't have to worry about pre-sanitizing that hose.
Okay.
So we're just going to set up our last couple of hoses. So if you want to attach that end, so this is going to be our wort coming in. So I'm going to detach our sanitized hose, which will be our wort coming out later. And we're just gonna put that in a bucket to start because that's going to have a bunch of sanitizer, which we don't want coming into our final product. So once we hit that pump, we will start in the bucket until we know that we've run clear and we're down to our beer, and then we'll move over to our fermenter. So I've already got our cold water coming in, so we just need a water out. Just like that. All right, so we've been sitting for enough time now. I'm gonna turn the cold water on. We've got a valve right here for that. So if you wanna hit the pump on that, then we'll start running our beer through.
Okay.
So you're holding it back so that you get a little bit of oxygen mixed in with the wort. The whole process, you're trying not to make that happen because you're gonna be breaking proteins and flavors out of solution. But at this point, because when you boil, you drive all of the oxygen out of the liquid. So we actually wanna add it back in because the yeast needs it to thrive. All right, so our wort is all chilled down. Everything's inside. All we gotta do is pitch our yeast. When it came to fermentation, we were using an Opshog Kvike. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but the Kvike yeast is Norwegian. What's really nice about the Opshog in particular is that it's a very, very clean yeast, so you can use it to substitute a traditional either American or British ale yeast. And what I really like about it is that unlike a traditional ale yeast where you would have to ferment at about 19 degrees and it would take a week or so to get through fermentation, you can pitch this at like 35 degrees and the majority of fermentation will be done in about 3 days. Well, let's give her a taste. Cheers. Homebrewer Kevin's Red Ale has finished fermenting, aging, and carbonating. Let's give this beer a taste. Welcome back to Home Brewmaster. All of our beers are finished and we're here for the moment everyone's been waiting for, the tastings. Our guest taster today is Jeff Mutton, owner and brewmaster of Concession Road Brewing Company. And we're working with our home brewer Kevin today and we brewed a red ale. So Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about your brewery?
Yeah, I own Concession Road Brewing Company in Jarvis, the village of Jarvis, and we've been around now just shy of 4 years. Just having a blast, brewing lots of different stuff, getting our community events going again. So we're really excited about that.
So what kind of beers do you normally brew?
Oh man, everything but lagers.
Fair enough.
Does that make sense?
That makes all sorts of sense.
I mean, we may, but still haven't kind of gone down that road yet.
Fair enough. What do you think makes your brewery unique?
I think the connection we have with the community. We really reach out to the community for ideas for what they want us to brew, events, all that kind of thing. So we are very tightly connected to the community.
And how many taps do you guys have at Concession Road?
We have 8.
Yeah.
Sometimes we struggle with having more beers than tap space. This weekend in particular, we ran a sale just so that we can start to bring out some of our new seasonals.
Yeah.
Clear up some kegs and that kind of thing. So
Nice. So what do you think about red ales in general?
definitely not my favorite style. We even recently brewed one. I know it's a good beer, but I personally am not a big fan. But that being said, I'm pretty open-minded. I used to feel the same way about pumpkin beers, and a local home brewer made a delicious pumpkin ale that we actually ended up scaling up in our brewery last year after I said I would never brew a pumpkin beer. So I am willing to keep it open-minded and try something for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, and let's get to tasting this beer. So normally when I'm doing a tasting, I always like to look at the color first.
It's got a nice amber hue.
Yeah, definitely a bit on the darker side of the reds, I would say. Give the aroma a check.
Smells about right for red.
Yeah, nice and malty smelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Roasty, touch of that kind of caramel.
Yeah, a little bit of that sort of toffee
Yeah.
aromas. Yeah, well, let's give her a taste. Cheers.
Taste the caramel and toffee in there.
Albeit not my favorite style, but if I was looking for a traditional, English red, that would kind of be on the money.
Hits the mark.
Not something I'd reach to, but very well done. Nice, clean, roasty.
Nice.
Rounds
Thank
off the
you.
palate nicely.
What do you think about the flavor, Kevin?
That's good, yeah. The toffee and caramel and
Yeah.
a little bit of sweetness, but it doesn't stick around. So it's well balanced,
yeah.
it seems, yeah.
Yeah, we were trying really hard with his beer to have it not overly malty sweet. You want that malt flavor, obviously, but you don't want that sort of cloying sweetness at the end. So I believe we ended up mashing in at about 65 to try and dry it out a bit, but keep some of those nice round malt flavors in there.
Yeah, there's a nice ester profile to it.
So if you could change anything about the beer, Kevin, what would you want to change?
Maybe the sweetness down just a little bit. So I don't know if that would be raising the bitterness up a bit to counteract it, or
You could definitely approach it that
mashing
way.
a little bit lower.
Yeah, we could definitely
like
also
that,
mash in at 64, maybe do a slightly longer mash to really try and break those complex sugars down. But I think, yeah, like you said, adding more hops, upping that bitterness, so you're kind of balancing out your bitter and your sweetness a little bit more,
Yeah.
would probably work too. You could maybe look at putting a little bit more hop flavor in there, so that even if you're not increasing the bitterness, you get that more floral, earthy kind of background.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, there's
Right.
all sorts of things you could tweak to play with it and get it right where you want it to be.
Nice.
Yeah.
As it stands,
Yeah.
it's still very drinkable.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I would have said a similar thing. The body is nice, so I don't think lowering the mash temp would be ideal. I think that maybe just a touch more on the bitterness side and maybe just a touch of noble hops towards the end of the boil could really just round it out really nicely.
That's a good point, because the body is giving you
It's got a
everything
nice
you want
body,
from a red, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you dry it out a bit more, then you're going to lose a little bit of that, which is not necessarily going to keep it in that red realm at that point, right? So that's a really good point. Increase the bitterness a bit and give you that earthy finish, right?
I'm a big fan of noble hops and anything traditional. I have about 5 hop styles that I like to use in anything that's traditional.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Well, thank you both so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And I'm glad you guys enjoyed the beer. Hope you learned some stuff that you can tweak this recipe in the future and try it at home.
That sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you. Learned quite a bit. And it was a nice bill to brew with a head brewmaster as well. I would try the more noble hops or a little bit at the end to get the earthy flavors in there. And yeah, maybe up the bitterness a little bit with it. That sounds like it would be rounded out very nicely.